good fashion light, really, especially for like half body. You can probably do a full body with that. It's a 120, yeah. So I really like that. That was our main modifier, I think, that we used.
And I think top light, basically, I think Mark was telling us he uses it for like mysterious kind of stuff. Like we kept calling it the Godfather light.
Yeah, exactly, because it has those dark shadows on the eyes, which if anyone's a fan of Godfather, that wasn't even a type of light. I think it was just almost like, not a happy accent. I think they were going for that, but I don't think the studio particularly liked it. When they were showing, the initial, like the dailies or whatever, people were kicking up a fuss. They were like, what are you doing lighting people from above with these dark shadows? That's why we are scared of, Marlon Brando's Don Corleone with, that heavy sort of top light and the dark eyes. You can't really see what's going on there. Lends itself to kind of an air of mystery and drama for sure, that top light.
Yeah, and also like a evildoer or something. Like maybe there's a character that you're not supposed to trust. Like if you can't see a catch light in someone's eyes or you can't see their eyes, I feel like you're already in this place of like, I don't know about you. And then we also have the second setup, which is the flat light. Do you use this a lot, Dave? Because I know that Mark was talking about using this for his commercials and stuff like that.
It's a good kind of commercial light to use, basically, just blasting light straight at your subject. As the name implies, very flat, not much kind of shadow, not much drama, and selling commercial products or making anyone just look good. Of course, you can shape flat light as well, and I think what we did is as it was showing in the video, we changed out the modifier, and that that little 55-degree reflector gives a really hard punch. It's pushing out a very contrasty, punchy light. And that's also flat. It's just a harder quality of light, and you can see it here. I mean,
you can see it in your eyes.
Completely different. Yeah, more glamorous. So, flat light, some people are like, oh, it's horrible. It's boring. But changing up the modifier can give you a completely different feel and a different vibe entirely.
Yeah. And this is cool because you can actually see the difference side by side.
Exactly.
Like that softer light really kind of like complements people's skin tones and stuff, and just kind of makes everything wrap around in a really flattering way.
And the shadow under the chin, which is always the thing that we're kind of looking at. When you look at the shadow and you see it kind of very soft and evenly dispersed, the quality of light is obviously softer. When you see those really hard edges to the shadow, which again, we got that from the flat light we just put on that 55-degree reflector, you get a much more defined shadow. As photographers, we typically call this butterfly, because of that little shape of, the butterfly with its wings open just below the nose that we just saw there. And in the movie industry, I can't remember when it was, we looked this up on set. I think it was going back to either the 30s or the 40s in Hollywood, from Paramount Studios. That's typically how they used to light, their talent. And as Mark rightly pointed out, I think butterfly and Paramount lighting, as the term is interchangeable.
Alex, again, looks great in anything, but since her face is a little rounder, what the butterfly light did, and you saw that line graphic come up, it kind of like shapes her face and kind of like shadow around her jaw.
Exactly, the light's raised up and then it's just angled down slightly. So it's kind of on axis with the camera, but tipping down. So that's why, you get a little bit of shadow, because it's kind of at an angle down. And then that helps also carve out the sides of the face as well,
Yeah. So when we did the loop light one, I think we did closed and open to kind of show like the differences between those as well, like open and broad.
I think so, yeah. And I used to get really confused when I was first learning, what different types of key light setups were. I always used to get confused. I was like, where is this loop? What is this loop that they're talking about?
What is this loop you're about? Yeah.
But it's right there. You can see you did a really good job of this on-screen stuff. It's that tiny kind of shadow coming off, and all it is it's kind of like, it looks like a loop.
With the loop light, you basically had to make sure that it wasn't creating that triangle that Rembrandt does.
And then we did open and closed or broad and short. And all it is all we're doing is we're either positioning the key light on the larger surface of the face, which is open to the camera and the light, so you're getting a lot more light in right there. Or we're kind of positioning the key light hitting just the kind of the closed or the short side right here. But, you can see it throws more of this side into shadow. And here we go into the Rembrandt, which is just that beautiful triangle, really. Underneath the eye on the kind of the shadow or the fill side, not the key light side. So if the key light is on this side, we'd basically be recreating a kind of a tiny shadow of light underneath
Yeah, like if you have shadow more in the part of the face that's open to the camera, I think that becomes again about character. Like when we were talking about top light, if the top light is creating shadow where your eyes are and you can't see someone's eyes, if somebody's face that's facing you is kind of in a little bit of more shadow and darkness, and then there's a little bit of highlight over here as opposed to this is nice and bright and open to you, that's a completely different emotion, I think.
Exactly. And the thing really that I love is that when you're learning about this stuff, the concept for newer photographers, it's just much easier to be able to see, you know, what the light source is doing and how just by shifting it slightly, especially like I say, when you have a large light source, putting out sort of very soft quality of light, sometimes it can be difficult until you sort of move it just, you know, a few inches either way and just change the angle. Then you can really start to see what's going on with the face. It's really about kind of what you're doing with light is you're filling in shadow. So when we want to create some kind of mood and emotion, we have to think, okay, well, I'm going to use this type of light because I know how it's going to affect the shadow side of the face. I mean, with flat lighting, maybe you don't get that at all. But for most of what I do, most of what we do, you're trying to create, you know, some three-dimensionality in the image, which means that you want to move the light source off so you don't have just this complete flat wash of light. And understanding how light and shadow interact is very important. And the opposite way of thinking, you know, when we start out, we're constantly trying to learn how to control and shape light. But it's just as much about kind of refining what you're doing to the shadow as well.
If you're having a lighting issue or you're not liking something for some particular reason, I often find sometimes it's about taking away light. So I mentioned that earlier where it's like...
Oh, absolutely.
Right? Like I always feel like if you're feeling like something's not quite working, a lot of the time it's that you actually have too much light and there's not enough shadow and you're not shaping the shadow because there's actually too much light going on. So I just start shutting off lights and turning them on to see what they're doing.
Absolutely. And one thing which I used to do a lot is I would build, you know, I would start with one light source, maybe like a key light for myself, and then build out sort of smaller accent lights and stuff like that. And this is, you know, when I started to get more into photography. And that way, as you rightly point out, as you introduce them one at a time, your brain starts to work out, oh, okay, I now understand what that light's doing. And also I can see that now that I've introduced it into the scene, it's kind of maybe it's too strong or the output isn't enough, so it's too low in terms of the power output. So you can begin to understand not only what the light does, but how to control the amount of output as well.
Because when everything's on at the same time, it is harder to kind of be able to dissect things. It kind of reminds me of how some photographers will actually turn a lot of their photos black and white so that they can see the light and the contrast and the shapes of things so that they're not distracted by the color. I feel the same way about turning off lights while you're kind of developing a scene. Actually, I think this is a good time to talk about the next setup, which is the split light, because it's like half shadow, half light.
Exactly. And again, it's the same type of thing. If you want to create the mood, the character, where you're not sure as someone, you know, whether you're looking at an image or an audience member in a movie or a TV show or something like that, if you want to create some kind of ambiguity around the subject, or maybe they're going through a psychological tough decision or something like that, split lighting is a great way to do that because it's basically half light, half shadow. It splits the face in terms of the lighting, but it sort of splits the mood or the emotion. It leaves us wondering.
Yeah, you're torn, you're split. I like the idea of that. Like with Hitchcock, I know he did a lot of like the bad character was in black and the good character was in white and that kind of stuff. So I feel like if half your face is light and half of it is in shadow, it definitely emotionally lets you realize that there's a split happening emotionally as well.
Exactly. One of the things that I really liked about the key light shoot is that we talked about the emotional interplay between what we're seeing and what we're doing. So why would you set the key light up in a certain way? Well, psychologically, what it's doing is it's having this kind of effect. And when you think of it in those terms, it becomes kind of easier, almost as a decision-making, like creative, to decide, well, okay, the mood I'm going for is this, and there's some drama and there's some mystery. Therefore, I'm not going to use flat light because it's not going to give me that in the image, you know? So it always comes back to storytelling.